What workshop or conference session did you attend prior to joining the monthly gatherings?
I've attended two Imagine More conferences. They were both just really inspirational. We got lots of ideas about possibilities, which I just had never thought about before. I just had this terrible place that I thought my son Christian, who's 10, would end up. When I drove past a bunch of people by the side of the road who all had disabilities, I just thought about him in a home with people where he wasn't safe, living with people that he hadn't chosen to live with. So I didn't actually know that there was a different possibility for him. And going to these conferences, the two I've been to, just really opened up my eyes to seeing what is possible. Now, the second part of that question was the session, the group, wasn't it? Yeah, so from that conference, there was, so not the first conference, I don't think, that I knew about, but the second one, so the interest of the group was canvassed, and topics that people were interested in, action groups were set up by Imagine More, and I went to the Inclusive Education Action Group, which has been a great part of that journey, from taking it just from the inspiration to actually mapping out a path of how you can take steps towards the vision of where you want your loved one to be.
Can you tell me more about your vision for your son and the reason for joining one of our action learning groups?
So a few years back, I actually didn't have a vision for Christian that I could identify. I didn't even really know what that meant. So after I met Jan, I actually started to understand the importance of that and to actually start crafting that. And that took me a while to do, and it's an ongoing process. It's definitely not set and forget. Before I had thought about the concept of developing a vision for Christian, I didn't know it, but I did actually have a vision for him, and it was a very dark vision, which I didn't put a name to, but it was everything that I saw in the community that I didn't want for my son. Sheltered workshops, not having a choice of employment, being congregated with other people with disabilities, not having choices about where he lived. The vision I had was that was something that he was destined for, which I didn't want him to go, and I didn't actually know that there was an alternative. So I just didn't think about it. I just pushed it away. So I started crafting this vision when I became aware through my interactions with Chan about what was possible, and working on that. So it was basically the polar opposite of everything I was scared of, and it was the exact same as what I wanted for my other son, who's 13 months younger than Christian. So the vision for Christian is centered around him having access to all the opportunities that his brother has access to, having access to all the amazing things in life that just make our lives normal, but just fantastic. And without them, we just don't have the quality. In particular, friendships, meaningful work, choosing where you live, having friends at school, taking on really important roles in life, just normal roles. Like, every role is important, but people with disability are often role starved. So my vision for Christian is, getting him to take on, building his capacity to take on those roles in his community, just like we all have roles, and they give meaning to our lives and connect us with people. Yeah, so that's his vision.
What sparked your interest in joining a monthly action learning group?
So late last year, I joined the Inclusive Education Group, and the interest for that came from developing Christian's vision and then actually breaking that down and finding out, looking for things that would help us move him towards that. And Christian is currently a segregated school, and it became very clear to me that it would be, very likely that him moving into a mainstream setting will actually move us closer to that vision. So yeah, and the group is, has been a great vehicle to actually assist me with that.
What process was used in the monthly gatherings?
When I first read the flyer, I was a bit scared of the process because it talked about, committing to action, and I thought, oh, is this right for me? I wanted to do stuff, but I was worried it was just going to be extra work. So, would I be able to achieve it, basically? So the groups were set up in a way that they were very small. So they were intimate groups where people had the opportunity to actually individually go through what they wanted to achieve with their person, what the issues were around achieving inclusive education and the valued roles in education. And it was there was a lot of flow and flexibility, but there was a lot of structure as well. We always walked away from the group with, a couple of dot points about things that we wanted to achieve before we met the next month. And the month time frame was a fabulous time frame, because although I'm sure there were people in the group that were like, the next day they'd be like, I've done that. For me, I actually needed that time. And I don't think a lot of these things happen overnight anyway. But I needed that time to actually work on that goal until the next meeting. And so then we'd turn up, we'd talk about what happened, we'd reflect on what happened, and then we'd set new goals for the next meeting. And you'd have the input from all those fabulous like-minded people, and fabulous facilitator. So yeah, it was really a really useful process, and a great the way it was set up was just very functional.
Did you find the monthly gatherings helpful?
Yes, I did. The gatherings were great, which is why I kept coming back every month. Well, you've got to commit up front anyway, but they were really useful. They moved me forward from a place of just dreaming and thinking about what I wanted for Christian, and enabling me to move those goals forward and actually start achieving outcomes. I've still got such a long way to go, and it's going to be a lifelong process, but it's actually embedded in me a process that I can take forward with me for the rest of his education, and actually utilise that. But it's also made me realise I need other people around, not to do the work for me, but to actually support me in that journey and assist me to move those ideas forward. I just can't do it. The group setting is the ideal setting. You just get all the different perspectives, but the small group setting is just essential, I think. If you get the group too big, it just wouldn't have worked as well, I don't think. And if it's too small, you just don't get those diversity of opinions and experiences, which allow you to mould an idea of what success looks like and where you might want to take things and how to take things, how to progress them.
Can you tell me some of the small and or large goals that you focused on?
Yes, okay. So the setting of goals was a very useful process. We started, most of the goals, they're small chunks that you can achieve. So I think the acronym for them is like SMART goals, and they have to be measurable and achievable, realistic. So with Christian, I found that if I set a small goal, and you felt like you could achieve it, you would actually then be more likely to get it, which would give you the confidence to move to other things. So some of the goals we did with Christian were achieving greater connection with children in his after-school care setting. So he would often be with the inclusion support when I turned up, and it would just be him and the inclusion support on the stage. So, over time, what's happened is that the inclusion support has moved away. More children have started to come into that space. We've actually got someone else on his team who understood how I wanted to move that forward, and they've actually been doing some work in that space, because it can actually be really hard to achieve these things sometimes unless you're working with like-minded people in that space. Another goal was to choose a school, which I'd been wanting to do for about 4 years, but just for some reason just hadn't. So I broke that down into steps. The first goal was to map the schools, and the next goal was to interview the principals, and then the next goal was to do the pros and cons, and then that would achieve the outcome of choosing a school. So look, obviously there's a baby steps. He's not yet in the school. I've got lots to learn and still lots to do, but the goals are, we'll continue to set small goals that will over time lead to really good outcomes.
So what are some of the outcomes that you've achieved?
So yeah, look, we've achieved lots of things in the last 5 months. I feel that I've been able to measure the progress and have a really good concept in my head of how far we've come, which prior to this point was things were happening, but they weren't as measurable, I think. So so we've had the outcome of he had his second birthday party ever, and we had just as many mainstream kids as special school kids, which was fabulous. That was an outcome that had been built up from lots of the little goals that I talked about previously of connecting him with people in his after school care setting and looking for greater inclusion in that environment. So they're all like little things that have led to that outcome. The other outcome is we've decided on a school, so still lots to do in that space, but that was a huge one. It sounds really simple. A lot of these things do sound simple, but it's not until you actually start to talk about them and think about them that you realise the complexities. But then at some point you need to break it down so you can take a step forward, because otherwise it just becomes overwhelming. But yeah, I can look back and actually measure some of that stuff now. The other outcome we've got is I've built into his team, there's another person that's come on board who can actually specifically support us in achieving these goals for Christian, because it's allowed me to clarify what sort of support we've needed in that space and how to move that forward. And so that's a really important outcome, having the right people in the right place who are available and have the capacity to actually help you to move things forward. I think attending the groups was a big outcome for me too, because attending those groups has allowed me to achieve these things, the inclusive education group. So just showing up on every Wednesday night sometimes felt like an outcome. But yeah, they were awesome groups. There could have been alcohol and more food involved, but they were fantastic groups otherwise.
Would you recommend the gatherings to other people?
Yes, I would. I'd strongly recommend them. I think that they're something that people... Look, if they're anything like me and they need other people and a bit of structure to actually move things forward, it's just a very useful process and much more effective than just meeting up and, talking about the things you're concerned about or the things that you want to achieve. It actually helps you take steps to get there. And you've got input from fabulous like-minded people, and the structure just allows all that input to be utilised in a great way. It's just I couldn't recommend them more. Go ahead, and they're actually enjoyable as well. Yeah.